Dr. Jerome Segal, you have billed yourself as left of Bernie Sanders, and you're in this Senate race in Maryland, and I'm wondering how someone with such progressive views and such progressive credentials that go back decades is doing in this race. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters.
Thank you. Well, there are many things. In a certain sense, it's Donald Trump and the opposition to him. That and Bernie Sanders have convinced me that enormous change is possible in this country. I think there's going to be a tsunami of reaction to Trump, and I think that what Bernie demonstrated actually is how fundamental changes can be in America. So those two things are part of it. The other part of it is I said somewhere that I'm just an ordinary citizen who's gotten very angry, but that really doesn't do justice to it. 29 years ago, I started an organization called the Jewish Peace Lobby. That was 7 years after I first got involved with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In 1987, I was part of the first delegation of American Jews to go to Tunis and to open dialogue with the PLO. That was before the first Intifada. It was before Oslo. And when we started the Jewish Peace Lobby in 1989, that was probably, 19 years before J Street. So we were J Street when it was gutsy, when it was hard, when everybody thought we were crazy. And during all that time and during all of American history, the truth of the matter is that no one has ever actually made a serious attempt to kneecap AIPAC. And by that I mean no one has ever put AIPAC on the ballot. No one has ever decided to pick out a major AIPAC captain or lieutenant in the Congress and simply go after them, try to retire them through voting. In other words, it's not a question of getting people to vote. It's a question of running against one of these guys like they did against Chuck Percy. That's how they became super powerful. And Cardin is one of the big dogs pulling the AIPAC sleigh. And
that's
he's my
Ben
senator.
Cardin you're talking about.
Yeah, and he's my senator. I live here in Maryland. I voted for him twice, didn't pay much attention to him. I expect very little from anybody in Congress and very little from Jewish members. But Cardin actually has changed. I think he was bought off in the 2016 elections when he went from the House to the Senate and received $400,000 from AIPAC-related PACs and probably a similar amount from AIPAC's individual supporters around the country.
Have you found this? I know this is a front and center issue for you. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask, have you found a resonance about this issue on the campaign trail? I know this, you've made it one of your key issues. I'm just curious how it's playing with your potential constituency.
Well, I would say more than one would think. And it's not just Israel and Palestine. It's also something very closely related to that. The connections actually are rarely discussed, but it's Iran. And I'll give you a sense. We did polling about the vote, the key vote in Congress on the Iran issue, and only 11% of Maryland Democrats who vote in primaries, and it's a very well-educated group that follows the news, only 11% of them knew that Cardin voted against the Iran deal. Now, this is a very popular piece of legislation in Maryland. About 5-1, Maryland voters view it as a major landmark in diplomacy that helped us avoid a war. Well, we asked this question, how would you respond if you found out that Cardin actually did vote against this and that he did so in support of Prime Minister Netanyahu's desire for an American attack on Iran? Here's what we got. We got 27% of registered Democrats said, no matter how great Cardin is on all other issues, I would never vote for him. I was flabbergasted.
So your feeling is you just need to get that word out then to the street, and you're saying then voters have said that they wouldn't vote for Cardin.
Well, look, no one has ever run against AIPAC. If I get 27%, let's say I didn't get any other vote, and I got 27% of the vote, having this be a central part of the campaign. And the campaign is much, much broader. Right? That's why I said I'm left of Bernie Sanders. I don't know if we'll have time to get into that.
Right. I want to get to that, though, because our time is limited. So clearly this AIPAC issue is something that you make the point quite well, and you tie it to Iran quite well. Let's talk about some of these other issues. Single payer.
Okay.
And I know you believe in investment in the inner city. I don't hear that enough from candidates. I love that that is one of your issues, and I'd like to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way. During the March for Our Lives, I went down to the mall, idiotically, with actually 1 million leaflets. I drove a U-Haul down there with 5,000 pounds of leaflets. But basically, and we had T-shirts that said, "The right to a childhood without fear." And what we were trying to do is reconceptualize the march and turn it from being basically just about kids who are being stalked in their schools and in movie theaters, and are mostly actually white middle-class kids, to all kids who suffer gun violence, in particular kids in the inner city who have a much higher death rate from this and live 24/7 in fear. Okay, so we're talking about the right of all kids to a right without, a right to a life without fear, or childhood without fear. Okay, so but Bernie and I agree on many specific policies, like higher minimum wage, a guaranteed job, free public schools, Medicare for all. And I'm not planning to play catch up with Bernie. I wrote a book 20 years ago, said all of these things. I actually was on the Hill in 1975. I directed a task force that I helped create on the distributive impacts of economic policy. And we held the only hearings ever held in the history of the Congress on the distribution of wealth in the United States. The point is, though, while we agree on specific policies, I come there in a totally different way, and two directions. One has to do with the job issue, right? So how do we create more good jobs in the United States? That's sort of the central crisis gripping this country and why people are scared, right? And I said it's not about bringing back manufacturing or trade wars against everybody or getting Amazon or Apple to come to your hometown. The way to bring back jobs, or to have more good jobs, is actually the focus on the lousy jobs and try to figure out what makes them lousy jobs and make them good jobs and have good jobs for everyone. And we can do that. And I said the most fundamental thing about that, right? The most fundamental thing that's necessary, and this is where it's really radical, is to separate household income or family income from whether or not a family's basic needs are met. And I jokingly said, in fact, this is basically Marx, at least ideally. This is from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Right? How we get there is a totally different thing. I said, we don't need a revolution. We just need good policy. And what I pointed out is that this is exactly what we do in the education sector. We have free public education for K through 12, which means that whatever a family's income is, their kids go to school free from K through 12. Now, we got to expand that to free college, which I went to, City College in New York, and also preschool. But the point is, we've got a model in education, and we got to broaden that to these other sectors. So that's the central thing. I also came to this through a totally different route, which is to ask, what's the purpose of an economy? What is an economy for anyway? And what I said, what it's for is actually to help people fulfill the American dream. And I postulated that there was an alternative American dream that doesn't get talked about. And that actually for most people, the American dream is not about getting super rich. Trump is super rich. Nobody wants to be Trump, not even the evangelicals. And we did polling on this in Maryland, and we found that 70% of Maryland voters said their American dream actually is to live modestly, securely, modestly, and have enough leisure to do those things that are important in life, which aren't staying at the office more. It could be anything. Religion, science, book clubs, being with your kids, anything.
Sure, they
But
don't
it's
want to be
not-
they don't want to be a slave to a crappy job. We're running out of time, and I just want to
Yeah.
mention. I mean, this as I've mentioned, Dr. Jerome Segal with a rich history. He taught philosophy at age 25 at University of Pennsylvania, and I can even hear in your reflections, almost a philosophical outlook and a philosophical paradigm shift on certain issues that would be so great to see in the Senate. You should learn about making these inner cities more livable places, and you can find it on his website. Let's post it now. The website is segalforsenate.org. You spell Segal, S-E-G-A-L, segalforsenate.org. There are also donation links and volunteer signups there, segalforsenate.org. What a pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Jerome Segal.
One last thing. On that website, I posted as a free download a copy of my book, Graceful Simplicity. So if anyone's interested in this, you can get the whole book just by one click, and it won't cost you a penny.
I love that. I'll tell you what, you've got a customer right here. I'll take a free download of that. I'd be very interested to read what you have to say. Good luck,
Great.
and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.